There is a dress hanging in your closet right now that you loved in the shop and have worn twice. It fits everywhere except one place, and that one place is why it stays on the hanger while you reach for the same two forgiving things you always reach for. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and today I am giving you 7 dress shapes that skim a midsection rather than cling to it, and not one of them asks you to put on shapewear to make it work. Before we start, the piece of information that makes the rest of this make sense, because it explains why so much of what you already own is failing you. A midsection changes shape after 60 for reasons that have almost nothing to do with what you eat. Falling estrogen shifts where the body stores weight, moving it from hips and thighs toward the middle. The abdominal wall softens. Posture changes as the spine compresses slightly with age, which tips the pelvis and pushes the lower belly forward even on a woman who has not gained a pound in 20 years. That is ordinary, it happens to nearly everyone, and it is not a failure of discipline. What matters for our purposes is that it changes which shapes work. A dress that skimmed beautifully at 45 may now catch at exactly the wrong point, and the dress did not change. The whole principle here is simple enough to hold in your head while you shop. You want fabric to touch you at the narrowest point and then fall away freely from there. Every dress on this list does that. The ones failing you are doing the opposite, gripping at the widest point and hanging straight down from it. Dress 1, the empire waist. The seam sits just under the bust, which is the narrowest part of most torsos regardless of what is happening below it. From that seam, the fabric falls straight down, touching nothing on the way. This is the oldest solution on the list and the most reliable. What ruins it is a poor fabric choice. A stiff fabric turns an empire waist into a tent, which reads as maternity and adds visual weight. What you want is fabric with genuine drape, meaning it falls in soft vertical lines rather than standing away from the body. Hold a corner in your hand in the shop. If it flops over your fingers, that is drape. If it holds its shape, put it back. Dress 2, the fit and flare. Fitted through the shoulders and bust, then flaring outward from a defined waist. The flare is doing something specific worth understanding. By adding width at the hem, it creates a triangle, and the eye reads the whole silhouette as a shape rather than examining any single part of it. The detail that decides whether this works is where the waist seam sits. On many off-the-rack dresses, it lands at the natural waist, which for many of us is now the fullest point rather than the narrowest. Look for a seam that sits slightly above that, closer to the bottom of the rib cage, and the whole dress changes. One practical note on the empire waist before we move on, because it is the shape women most often try and abandon. If it has ever felt like too much fabric on you, the issue was almost certainly the amount of gathering directly beneath the seam rather than the style itself. Look for one with a smooth panel across the front and the gathering placed at the sides, and it stops reading as voluminous entirely. Same silhouette, completely different result, and the difference is visible on the hanger once you know to look for it. Dress 3, the A-line with a soft shoulder. An A-line skims from shoulder to hem in one clean line with no waist seam at all, which means there is no horizontal break anywhere for the eye to catch on. Because there is no waist definition, this shape needs something else to give it structure, and that something is the shoulder. A defined shoulder, whether from a small pad, a set-in sleeve, or simply a well-cut seam, gives the dress a starting point. Without it, an A-line reads shapeless. With it, it reads deliberate. That distinction between what flatters and what merely covers is why I wrote the stylish 60-plus guide. It's a small one-time amount, less than a single salon visit, and it saves you from the expensive mistakes, the dress you wear twice, the closet full of pieces that never leave the hanger. Undertone, hair type, body shape, the search terms, the exact questions for the salon chair. It's the first link in the description and pinned at the top of the comments. Grab it before you shop again. Dress 4, the diagonal drape. This is the one most women have never deliberately looked for, and the one I would push hardest. Fabric gathered or draped on a diagonal across the midsection does two things at once. The gathers themselves add texture, and texture disguises what lies beneath it far better than smooth fabric does. And the diagonal line pulls the eye across the body at an angle instead of straight across, which visually narrows rather than widens. Look for words like ruched, gathered, or draped in the description, positioned at the side or across the front. Avoid anything gathered directly at the center front, which highlights the very spot you are trying to skim past. Dress 5, the wrap, with one important condition. A wrap dress creates a V at the neckline and a diagonal across the body, both of which work in your favor. The V draws the eye upward toward your face and elongates the neck, and the diagonal wrap does the same job as the drape we just discussed. The condition is where you tie it. Most women tie a wrap at the natural waist because that is where the ties fall, and on a fuller midsection that pulls the fabric tight across the widest point and creates exactly the horizontal emphasis you are avoiding. Tie it slightly higher, just beneath the bust or at the bottom of the ribs, and let the fabric fall from there. The dress is transformed, and it costs nothing to try with a wrap you already own. Something worth knowing about all 5 shapes so far, because it explains why the same dress can work on one woman and fail on another of the same size. Where your midsection is fullest changes which shape you want. Some women carry it higher, just under the bust, and some carry it lower, below the navel, and the difference matters more than the amount does. If you carry it higher, an empire waist can sit directly on the fullest point and work against you, and a fit and flare with the seam raised is usually the better answer. If you carry it lower, which is more common after 60 because of how posture shifts, an empire waist is close to ideal because the fabric is already falling free by the time it reaches the fullest point. Stand sideways at a mirror and look at where the widest point actually is rather than where you assume it is. That single observation tells you which half of this list to shop from, and most women have never checked. A quick word on sleeves, since they affect every dress on this list and almost nobody connects the two. A sleeve that ends at the fullest part of the upper arm draws a horizontal line right there and widens the whole upper body, which then makes the midsection read differently as well. A 3/4 sleeve ending just below the elbow is the most reliably flattering length for most of us because it finishes at the narrowest point of the arm and leaves the wrist visible, and a visible wrist makes the entire arm raid slimmer. If a dress is right in every other way but the sleeve lands badly, that is a simple alteration and worth paying for. Dress 6, the shirt dress worn open. A long shirt dress or duster worn unbuttoned over a simple dress or a top and trousers creates 2 strong vertical lines running the full length of your body, one down each side of the opening. Vertical lines lengthen. That is the most dependable rule in dressing, and it never stops being true. Those 2 lines break the width of your silhouette into 3 narrower panels, and the eye reads the narrow center panel rather than the whole. The rule that governs this one is to never button it. Buttoned, it becomes a fitted dress and you have lost the vertical lines entirely. Dress 7, the column with structure. A straight column dress in a substantial fabric, skimming rather than fitted, with no waist definition at all. This one depends almost entirely on fabric weight, more than any other dress here. A lightweight jersey column will cling to every contour and do the opposite of what you want. A heavier fabric with body, ponte, thick crepe, structured knit, or a good lined woven holds its own shape and hangs away from you rather than following you. The test in the fitting room is to turn sideways and look. A good column falls in a straight vertical line from bust to hem. If it dips inward at the waist and back out below, the fabric is too light and it is telling on you. A note on color that applies to all 7, because women ask about it constantly. A single color head to toe creates one unbroken vertical line and is the most lengthening choice available. That does not mean black. Any color worn as a column does the same work, and after 60, a soft navy, a deep plum, or a warm charcoal frequently flatters the complexion better than black does. If you want contrast, put it above the waist near your face rather than at the midsection. Now, 4 things that matter as much as which of those 7 you choose. The first is fabric weight, and I have mentioned it 3 times already because it decides more than the shape does. If you take one thing from this video, take this: a heavier fabric with drape skims, a thin fabric clings. The same dress pattern in 2 different fabrics produces 2 completely different results, and the label rarely tells you which you are holding. You have to feel it. The second is what goes underneath, and I promised no shapewear, so let me be clear about what I mean. A well-fitted bra changes your silhouette more than any shaping garment does, because lifting the bust creates visible space between bust and waist. Without that space, everything reads as one continuous block. Most women are wearing a band too loose and a cup too small, and correcting that alone changes how every dress on this list falls. The third is length, and it is the one most often gotten wrong. The most flattering hem for most women over 60 sits just at or just below the knee. Longer than mid-calf tends to shorten the whole figure by cutting the leg at its widest point, unless the dress runs full length to the ankle, which lengthens instead. Above the knee is a personal choice, and nobody should tell you otherwise. The fourth is where you place attention, because the eye goes wherever you send it. One deliberate element near your face, a bold necklace, an interesting neckline, good earrings, gives every eye in the room a destination above the midsection. Without a focal point, the eye wanders and settles wherever it likes, which is rarely where you would choose. One more thing about fit that saves a great deal of money in fitting rooms, and it applies to all 7. Buy for the widest measurement and have the rest taken in. Nearly every woman I hear from does the opposite, buying for the size she wants to be and hoping the fabric will forgive the difference. It never does, and a dress straining anywhere reads as a size too small even when the rest fits perfectly. A dress that hangs slightly loose through the shoulders and bust can be altered for very little money at any tailor. A dress that pulls across the midsection cannot be fixed at all because there is no fabric left to work with. That single change in approach will do more for how your clothes look than any shape on this list, and it is worth saying plainly that alterations are not an admission of anything. Ready to wear is cut for a proportion almost nobody actually has, and the women whose clothes always look right are very often the women with a tailor. There is one more thing worth checking in the fitting room that takes 5 seconds and tells you more than the mirror does. Sit down in the dress. A great many dresses that skim beautifully while you are standing pull tight across the midsection the moment you sit, and if you are going to a lunch, a service, or a dinner, you will spend most of the event sitting rather than standing. Sit, look down, and see what the fabric does. If it pulls or gathers where you would rather it did not, that dress is going to make you self-conscious for 3 hours, no matter how good it looked on the hanger. And a word on what to avoid, since it saves you money in the fitting room. Clingy thin jersey without lining, horizontal seams or stripes crossing at the fullest point, belts worn at the natural waist when the natural waist is now the widest point, stiff fabrics that stand away from the body and add bulk, and anything with elastic gathering at the exact center front, junking all of those from your consideration cuts your shopping time in half. So there are your 7. The empire waist that falls from beneath the bust, the fit and flare with the seam raised slightly, the A-line with a defined shoulder giving it structure, the diagonal drape that adds texture and cuts across at an angle, the wrap tied higher than the ties suggest, the shirt dress worn open for 2 long vertical lines, and the structured column in fabric with enough weight to hang away from you. Not one of them requires you to compress yourself into anything to leave the house. One more thing about alterations, because it is the least used tool available to us and the most powerful. Nearly every dress on this list improves with one small adjustment by a tailor, and the cost is usually modest. Raising a waist seam an inch, taking in the shoulders so the dress hangs from the right place, shortening a hem to hit at the knee rather than mid-calf. Off-the-rack sizing is built for an average body that nobody actually has, and after 60, the gap between that average and your own proportions is usually wider than it was at 40. A well-chosen dress that has been adjusted to you will outperform an expensive dress that has not, every time. Here is the thought I want to leave you with. Every one of these works by the same principle, which is letting fabric touch you where you are narrowest and fall freely from there. Once you understand that, you can walk into any shop and evaluate a dress in about 4 seconds without knowing what the style is called or what the tag says. And I want to say the other part plainly. A softer midsection after 60 is what a body does. It is not a problem to be solved, and dressing it well is not the same as apologizing for it. You are choosing how to frame yourself, which is the same thing you have been doing your whole life, with better information than you had before. Tell me in the comments which of these 7 you already own without realizing why it worked, and which one you are going to look for. And if you have a dress that has been hanging unworn for a year, describe it to me, because I can usually tell you in one line what is wrong with it. I read every single one. I am Eleanor Whitmore, and I will see you in the next one.